There is a moment that most people miss, but your nervous system feels it instantly. It's the moment you stop explaining yourself and the air in the room suddenly becomes heavy. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't start a fight. You simply stopped filling the silence with justifications, and suddenly the person across from you looks like they've lost their footing. They aren't sure which rules apply anymore. They are waiting for you to offer the explanatory tax, that 3-minute story you usually tell just to make them feel comfortable with your choices. But this time, you don't offer it. You just exist. And for reasons that are rarely spoken aloud, that silence speaks louder than any defense you've ever mounted. If you felt this, you know it isn't comfortable. Part of you feels a strange, cold anxiety, wondering if you've become hard or unkind. But underneath that discomfort is something else. A quiet weight, a sense of psychological gravity that you haven't felt in years. Most people spend their entire lives narrating their existence into acceptance. They explain why they were late, why they changed their mind, or why they are feeling a certain way, all before anyone even asks. We are trained from childhood to believe that if we aren't understood, we aren't safe. We treat our inner truth like a piece of evidence that needs to be presented to a jury just to stay in the room. But here is the truth that no one tells you. Explanations are not just information. They are invitations for judgment. Every time you over-explain, you are telling the other person, you get to decide if I make sense. You get to weigh in on my reality. You are effectively positioning yourself beneath their approval. And when that stops, the power dynamic in the room doesn't just shift, it completely rearranges itself. The silence you create doesn't stay empty, it becomes a mirror. And mirrors make people confront things they aren't prepared to see. When you stop explaining, you stop negotiating your identity in real time. You move from being a performer who needs applause to a presence that simply is. This is the first recognition. Not that you are becoming distant, but that you are finally becoming whole. You've spent so long translating your soul into a language that others can digest that you forgot what your natural voice sounds like. You've been paying a tax on your own existence for far too long. But as you pull back that access, you will notice people reacting in strange, almost primitive ways. Some will pull away, some will become aggressive, and some will try to provoke the old you back into the light. In the next part, we are going to explore the dark psychological reason why your silence makes people so desperate to finalize you, and the invisible contract you've been signing every time you opened your mouth to justify your life. We're trained from birth to narrate ourselves into safety. Think about the last time you were misunderstood. Your heart rate spiked. Your brain immediately started drafting a speech. You felt this desperate, almost primal urge to fix the image of you that was sitting in someone else's head. This is because, in our social hierarchy, explanation is more than just communication. It is a form of emotional caretaking. When you explain yourself, you are taking responsibility for the other person's comfort. You are saying, I will move the furniture of my soul around just so you don't trip over it. But this habit has a hidden, lethal cost. Every time you over-clarify, you perform an act of self-fragmentation. You trim a piece of your truth to fit someone else's narrow understanding. You soften your edges so you don't make the room uncomfortable. Psychologically, you are teaching your nervous system that your natural, unedited state is a danger. You are telling yourself that you only have permission to exist if you can be easily digested by the people around you. This is the invisible contract you signed years ago. I will be manageable in exchange for being accepted. When you finally stop explaining, you aren't just changing your behavior, you are ripping up that contract. And that is why the atmosphere around you shifts so violently. The silence you leave behind doesn't stay empty, it becomes a mirror. Most people rely on your explanations to tell them how to feel about you. They use your words as a map to navigate the relationship. When you stop providing that map, they are forced to walk without coordinates. Uncertainty makes people behave strangely. Without your narrative, they have to face the vacuum. And the mind cannot tolerate a vacuum for long. They will start scanning. They will start projecting. If you aren't providing the context, they will invent it. Some will assume you've become arrogant. Others will assume you're hiding something. But what they are truly reacting to is the sudden withdrawal of your self-abandonment. They aren't missing your words. They are missing the control they had over your identity. You've stopped being a reflection of their expectations and started being a presence they cannot resolve. This creates a psychological pressure that is almost impossible to ignore. You will feel the temptation to step back into the role, to smooth things over, to reassure them that you're still safe and explainable. But there is a reason you shouldn't, because the moment you start proving yourself is the moment you start positioning yourself beneath their judgment. In the next part, we are going to look at the access trap, how your silence triggers a primitive fear in others, and why their attempt to provoke you is actually a sign that you are finally winning. The truth is, most people aren't looking for a relationship with you. They are looking for a relationship with the version of you that is predictable. They want a version of you that fits into a neat, labeled box in their mind. And the primary tool you've used to build that box is your own explanation. When you stop offering it, you aren't just withholding words, you are removing access. And humans, by nature, are terrified of what they cannot access. If they can't define you, they can't control you. Think about the way someone reacts when you don't explain a decision. They don't just sit in the silence, they start speaking for you. They fill the vacuum with their own insecurities and their own fears. Because your silence has become a mirror, it reflects back their inability to tolerate mystery. They may start to tell themselves, and others, that you've changed, that you've become cold, or that you're acting superior. They are attempting to finalize you. They want to resolve the tension of your presence by deciding who you are, even if that decision is a total lie. This is where the psychological stakes rise. You will notice people who once seemed close to you suddenly becoming edged or clipping their tone. They are mourning the loss of their influence. When you stop explaining, you stop being malleable. You are no longer negotiating your reality for their comfort, and that shift disrupts unspoken hierarchies. Suddenly, you aren't asking to be understood. You are allowing yourself to be perceived. There is a massive difference. One seeks approval, the other accepts ambiguity. Most people are comfortable with the first. Very few can survive the second. What's actually happening is that your presence now requires others to regulate themselves. Usually, they rely on you to do that for them. They rely on your explanations to soothe their confusion and manage their perceptions. When you stop, you place the burden of their emotions back on their own shoulders. That is a heavy thing to hold, and they will often resent you for it. They will test you. They will ask questions designed to trigger your old habit of clarification. They want the relief that your explanation used to provide. They want to pull you back into the social persona that Carl Jung warned us about, the mask we wear to be liked by the collective. But this is the moment of your transformation. Every time you resist the urge to smooth things over, you are practicing what is known as psychological sovereignty. You are signaling that you trust your own stillness more than their approval. You are proving that you don't need to be read correctly to be whole. You have stopped being a translator and started being an entity. This is where the quiet gravity begins. But be warned, as your internal landscape aligns, the pressure from the outside will only increase. In the next part, we are going to look at the erosion of the reasonable one, why being the logical person was actually your cage, and the one choice that turns your silence into a lethal affirmation of who you really are. You have spent years being the reasonable one, the person who de-escalates, the person who bridges the gap between what you meant and what they heard. You've been praised for your maturity, your patience, and your ability to make sense of things. But let's look at the cold logic behind that role. Being the reasonable person is a form of identity labor that you perform for free. It is a cage that society built for you, and you've been decorating the inside of it with your own explanations. The reason people want you to be reasonable is simple. It makes you manageable. As long as you are explaining your choices, you are essentially asking for permission to have them. This is the erosion of the reasonable one. When you finally stop explaining, you aren't just being silent. You are killing a version of yourself that everyone else found convenient. And that version won't go quietly. You will feel a wave of guilt that feels like a moral failure. You'll think you're being cold or that you're shutting down. But that guilt isn't your conscience speaking. It is the residue of your conditioning. It is the voice of every person who ever benefited from your self-censorship, screaming because they've lost their favorite tool. You were never meant to be a bridge for people who refuse to walk halfway. When you stop explaining, you move from being reasonable to being real. Real people are often inconvenient. They have boundaries that don't come with a manual. They have silences that they don't apologize for. This shift is where your true power lies, but it is also where the loneliest part of the journey begins, because the reasonable one was the character that gave you belonging. Without that mask, you are standing in the room as a stranger to the expectations of others. You are no longer performing a coherence that doesn't exist. You are allowing the world to see the jagged, unpolished edges of your truth. The system hates this. It wants you to collapse back into the role. It wants you to feel so uncomfortable with the tension that you start talking just to make the air feel lighter. But every word you offer in those moments is a step back into the cage. You must realize that your stillness is not a lack of communication. It is the highest form of communication. It is a signal of psychological sovereignty. It says that your internal landscape is no longer open for public negotiation. It says that you are finally willing to be misunderstood if that is the price of being honest. In this final stretch, we have to look at the ultimate consequence of this choice. The moment where your silence stops being a defense and becomes a permanent state of authority. The moment where you stop waiting for an arrival and realize that you have already arrived. The silence you have chosen is not an absence of sound. It is a presence of power. For years, you lived under the impression that if you didn't build a bridge of words between yourself and the world, you would be left behind. You thought that being understood was a prerequisite for being valued. But today, the logic flips. The most respected people in history were never the ones who explained themselves the most. They were the ones who were so grounded in their own truth that they didn't feel the need to justify it to anyone. They understood that the moment you offer an explanation to someone who didn't earn your vulnerability, you are handing them a weapon to use against you. You are no longer a translator for a world that refuses to listen. You are no longer the reasonable one who carries the emotional labor of the entire room. This is the final recognition. You were never broken for being quiet. You were simply preserving your depth for a life that hasn't arrived yet. But that life cannot arrive as long as you are busy smoothing over the edges of your current existence. The numbness you felt, the distance you sensed, was actually your integrity trying to save you. It was your mind's way of saying, stop giving pieces of yourself away just to keep the peace. There is a subtle, heavy relief that comes when you finally accept that people will misinterpret you. Let them. Let them call you cold. Let them call you distant. Let them tell stories about your silence that have nothing to do with who you are. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their inability to hold the vacuum of your presence is a reflection of their own internal chaos, not your lack of character. When you stop explaining, you are finally allowing yourself to be whole. You are choosing psychological sovereignty over social convenience. This shift is not a destination. It is a way of standing in the world. It is the realization that your worth is not conditional upon comprehension. You are allowed to be a mystery. You are allowed to be unresolvable. You are allowed to simply exist without footnotes. And in that existence, you will find a version of peace that being understood could never give you. You have spent a lifetime being a mirror for everyone else's needs. It is time to be the light that they have to adjust to. If you have reached this final moment, you are ready to reclaim the space you've been vacating. Before you go, I want you to perform one final act of authority, not for the algorithm and not for me, but as a public boundary for yourself. Comment below with the phrase, "I'm no longer explaining." By typing those words, you're telling yourself that the contract of self-justification is officially cancelled. You are signaling to the world that from this moment forward, your presence is no longer negotiable. You are here, you are whole, and you are finally, truly uncompressed.